I felt God call me to preach. Unlike Isaiah, there was no vision of a high and mighty God. There was no massive train filling a temple. There were no shaking doorposts or smoke-filled rooms. There was maybe a shaking head and smoke coming out of my ears because I was like, God, you must be crazy. There was no enthusiastic, here I am, Lord, send me. It was more like, here I am, Lord, but what are you thinking? Both Isaiah's call story and my own would begin with a time marker. Maybe yours would too. Can y'all hear me? When I was a sophomore in college, in the year that King Uzziah died. If Moana were to tell us her call story, she'd probably tell us that the ocean chose her from a young age to sail across the sea and restore the heart of Te Fiti. But she lived on an island, and the one rule was that you did not go beyond the reef. She was the daughter of the chief. She knew that one day she would be the leader of her people, and so she felt torn between her responsibility and what she felt called to do by the ocean. If Moana were to tell us her call story, it would probably begin with, in the year that all the coconuts dried up, in the year that there were no more fish, I answered the call of the ocean. In my sophomore year of college, in the year that the fish dried up, in the year that King Uzziah died, they all start with a timestamp. But these timestamps have different meanings. See, when I begin my story about being a sophomore in college, that's a chronological timestamp. It has absolutely no importance to the rest of the story other than to let you know kind of the context of where I was, how old I was, but it had no other reason other than to let you know how long I have felt called to vocational ministry. In the year that the fish dried up, that's not a chronological timestamp. It's a timestamp, but not one that declares the chronos time, the actual second, minute, historically accurate year, the chronology. Instead, it's a kairos timestamp. These are the two words that the Greeks used for time, chronos and kairos. And chronos, as you know, it's where we get our term chronology from. It's seconds, minutes, hours, years. But you also have kairos time, which was more about moments. When you say something like, this was an opportune time, you're not talking about chronos time, you're talking about kairos time. Kairos is the word that designates time in the moments where it was appropriate to take action, where there was some sort of impetus for something. And for Moana, her call from the ocean came chronologically when she was like 2. But the kairos time, the kairos moment of her call, the moment where she knew she had to act, was when those coconuts dried up and all the fish disappeared. In my sophomore year of college is chronos. When all the fish disappeared is kairos. And when we read Isaiah 6, we see the phrase, in the year that King Uzziah died, and usually we treat it as if it is a chronos marker. It's to help us know historically when these things started happening, so we would know historically when Isaiah felt his call. But church, in the year that King Uzziah died is not a chronological marker. It's a kairos marker for Isaiah. It's a kairos one. See, Isaiah and King Uzziah were actually friends. King Uzziah was older than Isaiah, and most scholars believe that Isaiah looked up to him, treated him as a role model. Biblical evidence suggests that Isaiah was from a noble family. He had a lot of easy access going in and out of throne rooms and talking to kings, and we think this is what helped him have this friendship with the king. There's actually a rabbi from the 11th century. It's a Jewish traditional belief that goes back to the 11th century that Isaiah and King Uzziah were cousins, that their dads were brothers, and they were cousins, having grown up together. King Uzziah's death wasn't just the passing of another monarch in the usual succession of kings. For Isaiah, King Uzziah's death was a moment of grief. It was heartbreaking. It was a friend that was lost. This is a kairos marking. And it was also a time of upheaval, because just a few years before Isaiah's death, go with me on this history lesson for a second. There is this Assyrian ruler named Tiglath-Pileser III. It's very fun to say. Tiglath-Pileser III, and he had just come to rule in Assyria, and he had started this methodical expansion of the Assyrian Empire, and he was creeping ever closer to Syria and to Palestine. And when King Uzziah was alive, he was able to keep the Assyrians at bay. But then King Uzziah died, and we all know that nations are at their weakest when there's a transition of power. And so there was this kind of element of fear that had started to arise. Uzziah had a son who was his successor, but he was not a good man like Uzziah was. He did not honor God, he did not rule well, and the nation was plummeting into chaos and fear. It was in the year that King Uzziah died. Or we could say it was in a time of grief and chaos and fear that Isaiah saw the Lord lifted high on his throne. And he heard the Lord's invitation in this time of grief and chaos and fear to show up in the world in a new way, to step into the unknown. Our passage this morning ended with Isaiah saying, "Here am I, send me." But Isaiah actually said that before he knew what God wanted him to say, before he knew the message God had for him. I'm not going to tell you about it. You can check out Isaiah chapter 1, verses 15 through 17 if you want. God just says some really cool stuff like, I'm not going to listen to your prayers anymore because you have blood on your hands. And until you stop doing evil, start doing what is good, seek justice, care for the orphan and the widow, these are the things that God wanted Isaiah to say. This was not a message that made him friends. And he had said, "Here I am, send me," before he even knew what God wanted him to say. And it's like God tells him, actually, in the verses just after where Christy finished, God tells him to give this message, but he says the people aren't going to listen. And Isaiah goes, "Well, God, then how long am I supposed to tell them this message?" And this is what the Lord says. Until everything is gone. Until cities are destroyed and homes are deserted, the land is uninhabited, the fields are ravaged. I'm really not making this stuff up. This is somewhere around, verse 11 in the chapter that we just read. And Isaiah's like, I'm sorry, what? He didn't know what he was signing up for when he said, "Here I am." He had just seen the glory of God and he was like, "I'll do it." And then God's like, "Great, here's what you get to say." It's almost as if God is saying, the future is bleak, Isaiah, but you are called to do the work even as it is bleak. It's going to get worse, Isaiah, but you are called to do the work even as it gets worse. And here's something I wonder about. Isaiah had seen the glory of the Lord, and that's why he said yes. But then he hears this message from God, and I wonder if Isaiah had said, "Okay, wait, no, that's not what I signed up for. I can't do that. People are going to hate me. People are going to reject me. I don't want to. Choose someone else." I believe God would have said, okay. I don't think God forces any of us to follow God's way, to accept the call. If Isaiah had said, choose someone else, I think God would have said, okay. In Moana, we have this moment where she has traveled across the sea and she has gone to the barrier islands, and the lava monster pops up and fights back and sends her and Maui all the way back, almost destroys Maui's hook. And now they're alone in the middle of the ocean, miles away from where they need to be. And Maui, her companion, is mad. he blames her and a decision that she made for the reason why his hook is broken. And she's trying to come up with a new plan and to rally his spirits for a second go round, and he's not having any of it. He's done. He wants to leave. And she's like, but Maui, the ocean chose me. And Maui says, it chose wrong. And then he leaves. And there she is, all alone in the middle of the ocean, defeated and abandoned. And she looks at the ocean, which is personified as this kind of column of water. And she says, why did you bring me here? I am not the right person for this. And she holds up this kind of green emerald pebble that represents the heart of Te Fiti, and she says, choose someone else. And the ocean is still, and it doesn't move. And she does it again. Choose someone else, please. And slowly the ocean comes and takes the heart away and drops it back down into the deep waters of the sea. The ocean chose her and called her and invited her just like God invited Isaiah. But she did not have to say yes. She wasn't forced to say yes, and she would not be forced to continue. Choose someone else. In the Kairos time when the fish dried up, Moana was called to sail across the sea. In the Kairos time when King Uzziah died, Isaiah was called to speak a message of truth to God's people. In church, I believe we find ourselves in another Kairos time. There are things happening in the world and in our country that are concerning, to say the least. We are in a Kairos time where there are two very different Christianities on display. One is a Christianity of earthly power and rule and dominion. It's a Christianity that praises the authority even when the authority is being weaponized against the most marginalized in our society. And we know that if Jesus showed a preferential option for anybody, it was the most marginalized in society. So let's make no mistake. The Christianity that's on display right now is a distorted Christianity that is inextricably tied to political power. And it is not the Christianity of Jesus. And even though I know that to be true, and even though I think many of you know that to be true, I am shaking as I stand up here and say it to you. I am terrified to be a pastor right now. I don't know how to pastor us through some of this. I am struggling, if I can just be really, really honest, I'm struggling reading my Bible because I'm hearing verses being twisted for agendas that I don't think that's how they're supposed to be used. And I'm struggling to pray because I don't know how to pray. And I am struggling knowing how to be a pastor. Because I am afraid. There have been so many times in the last few weeks that I've wanted to say, choose somebody else. I am afraid that if I say what is true, or if I bring it up, or if I don't bring it up, I'm going to make somebody mad. I want this church to be a safe place for all of us, where whoever shows up here is welcome and safe. And more than that, I want it to be a brave place for all of us, where we can have hard conversations and disagree with one another and still love each other. I also want this church to be a respite from the barrage of news that we're all getting during our week, to be a place where we don't have to hear about it, where we can find hope and joy and peace in the midst of whatever's going on out there. And I also want the church to be a place that will speak truth to the power and principalities and authorities that are out there, especially when they're doing things that are hurting our neighbors. And I don't know how to hold all that together. I'm going to try. But it's a hard thing right now. And here's why. Because I am so afraid, like I just said, that if I speak the truth, or if I say the thing, or if I don't, Somebody's going to get mad, and I am afraid you're going to leave. And that would break my heart, because I love you. I love all of you individually, and I love this community. I love that we have Republicans and Democrats. And I know there's been a lot of vilification on both sides, but I will tell you, we have some of the best Democrats I've ever met, and we have some of the best Republicans I've ever met. Okay? I love that we have both. I love that we have gay people and straight people in this congregation. I love that we have cisgendered people and transgendered people. We have neurodiverse people and neurotypical people. I love that we have people of various ages and various physical abilities. I love our diversity. I love our racial diversity, even though it is very small. I will tell you, I pray every day, sincerely, that we will grow in our racial and ethnic diversity, because I think that represents the kingdom of God. And I think we would be better for it. I love this congregation. And I want to find ways for us to move forward in this time together as a community in all of our diversity and differences of opinion. And I hope you're hearing my heart. And I hope you're hearing me say that I'm going to try to use that pulpit with care, and not as a weapon against anybody. But I am going to try to use it to make our church a safe space and a brave space and a respite and a place of hope and a place of joy and a place of justice and truth. Because I think we need all of it right now. I think we're going to go there together. We need to be able to go there together. Dayspring, I think we are in a kairos time. And I will tell you, as the pastor, I'm nervous, but I'm also ready. I'm ready, and I'm ready to lead us to it. And I'm ready to lead us through it. We are being invited by God to show up in the world differently than we have before. These societal and political changes are both an impetus and an invitation. They are our impetus and our invitation into a new way of being in the world, a new way of being the church together, in ways that are faithful to the God who called us and responsive to the truth of Jesus, reflective of the love of Christ, and listening to the Holy Spirit. And as your pastor, my goal is to secure our steps so that we can move forward together. And I've got some ideas, y'all. I've got some feelers out. I've got some things in the works, and you're going to be hearing from me in the next few weeks about opportunities that are developing for us to serve, to do the work together as a church community. And I don't know what's ahead, but I know we will need each other. And I know our community will need us. I saw something yesterday about how Mr. Rogers always used to tell children that when they see tragic things on the news, they need to look for the helpers. Do y'all remember this? Whenever there are things that are hard or scary, he encourages the children to look for the helpers. And I think children need that. They need that hope. But I saw a thing that said, but now we're the adults. Now we get to be the helpers. We get to become the helpers and the hope that other people see. And we have a choice. We can say, choose someone else. Or we can say, here I am. Here we are. Send us. If we go, there's just no telling how far we'll go. And I hope we go together. We're about to sing a song that are based on these verses from Isaiah, and I want to invite us all to use it as a response to God, a personal response and a communal response. You can stand if you like, you can sit if you like, you can raise your voices, you can raise your hands, but let this song be our response of the call of the Lord.